Hercules is the son of Jupiter, the king of the gods, and of a mortal woman. Jupiter's jealous wife, Juno, drives him crazy at one point, and he kills his own children. To be forgiven by the gods, he must obey the king of Mycenae by performing exploits. Hercules must kill a lion which is ravaging the region of Nemea. This animal is so strong that the hero's arrows and sword do not even hurt it. Hercules then pursues him into his lair, where, thanks to his phenomenal strength, he strangles him. Then he cuts the animal's skin with one of its claws and uses it as a protective coat. Hercules must defeat a Hydra, a multi-headed monster that lives in the marshes of Lerna. Every time he cuts off a monster's head, 2 more grow back. He then asks his cousin for help. He cuts off the heads, and his cousin burns the scars so that the heads do not grow back. This is how the Hydra dies, and our hero can dip his arrows in the poisonous blood of the beast. Hercules must capture the doe of Cerynea with its golden horns, which travels at spectacular speed. He chases her for a year before finally succeeding in shooting her with an arrow while she takes a break in a meadow. He aims so well that the arrow immobilizes his legs without hurting her. Hercules must capture the wild boar that lives on the mountain of Erymanthus. The animal destroys everything in its path with its sharp metal tusks. Our hero decides to wear him out running. He pursues it for a long time. The animal ends up falling to the bottom of a large hole in the snow. Hercules hoists him up with a rope, ties him up, and takes him to Mycenae, where the king gets scared. Hercules must clean in one day the stables of King Augeas, which have never been cleaned. He climbs a hill to observe the region and decides to make a dam on the river, which passes near the stables. It thus diverts this river, which crosses the stables and cleans them all by itself. Hercules must hunt the birds of Lake Stymphale, which attack humans with their bronze beaks, claws and feathers. Minerva gives him bronze cymbals. He hides and bangs these large cymbals. The birds, frightened by the enormous noise, fly away, and our hero pierces them with his big arrows. Hercules must bring back alive the bull from the island of Crete, where King Minos reigns. This wild bull terrorizes the inhabitants and destroys everything in its path. The hero confronts him in a clearing, turning him around and around, then jumps on his back, ties him up, and brings him to the king. Hercules must tame King Diomedes' mares, who feed on human flesh. When he arrives, he knocks out the mares, who are finishing their horrible meal. Diomedes runs up with a club. The 2 men fight. Hercules ends up knocking Diomedes out and throws him to his mares, which devour him. Hercules must bring back the belt of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. At first, he encounters no difficulty because the queen falls in love with him and gives him her belt. But Juno, the queen of the gods and enemy of the hero, makes the Amazons believe that Hercules actually wants to kidnap their queen. The hero, surrounded by enemies, must then kill Hippolyta to grab his belt and flee. Hercules must fetch the oxen of Geryon, a terrible giant with 3 heads and 3 trunks. He begins by knocking out the dog guarding the herd. Geryon, furious, takes his 3 helmets, his 3 shields and his 3 spears and pursues our hero, who shoots him a poisoned arrow before leaving with the oxen. Hercules must bring back the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. Atlas, a giant who carries the celestial vault on his shoulders, offers to go and find them by neutralizing the dragon if Hercules wants to replace him to carry the sky. When Atlas returns with the 3 golden apples, Hercules gives him back the celestial vault by making him believe that it will only be for an instant, just enough time to readjust his position. But in fact, he takes the apples and leaves, leaving the sky on Atlas's shoulders. Hercules must bring Cerberus to Mycenae, the 3-headed dog with the dragon's tail who guards the underworld. He advances towards the enormous dog who takes refuge behind the throne of his master Hades, the god of the underworld. The hero, protected by his lion skin, leaps at Cerberus. He squeezes the dog's neck, ready to suffocate it. Hades then authorizes Hercules to take him to the palace of the king of Mycenae, who, panicked, asks Hercules to bring Cerberus back to the underworld. Hercules does not fight any wolf in his 12 labours. Here is what the famous Latin poet Virgil says. Aeneas, the prince of Troy, who descends from the goddess Venus, arrives in the Lazio region of Italy. His distant descendant, king of the city of Alba, was chased from the throne by his brother. This evil brother forces Rhea Silvia, the king's daughter, to become a Vestal, that is to say, a priestess who must remain celibate. But Rhea Silva is seduced by the god Mars. She gives birth to 2 twins, Romulus and Remus. Her evil uncle wants to make these 2 children disappear. His guard places their cradle on the river, the Tiber. The cradle stops near the Palatine Hill. A she-wolf finds the babies and gives them her milk. Then shepherds take them into their home and raise them. As adults, Romulus and Remus want to found a city in the place where they grew up. They call on the omens. These priests tell them that the king of this city will be the one who sees the most birds passing by. But they do not agree on the number of birds seen, so they fight. Romulus kills Remus. Thus he becomes the founder of Rome.
Romanus es. Yes, you are Roman. In Pompeii, you are at the heart of the empire, not far from Rome. This gigantic city, with its millions inhabitants, Caput Mundi, the capital of the world. Viva Campania! Long live Campania! The rich Romans come here to rest and enjoy the pleasant climate. You are lucky. You live here, at the foot of a beautiful mountain. Its name? Vesuvius. A very normal mountain for centuries.
As you come from a rich family, you have toys. Here are some that you and your little brother like to ludere, to play with. An articulated doll, or small terracotta animals. Games of luck, like dice, or games of skill, for example, small stone marbles. These are other games. Do you like to play with a pila, a ball, and your little brother with a oscillum, a swing? I'm sure both of you enjoy driving this little chariot pulled by geese or dogs. And sometimes you imitate characters. For example, you play the mother, the soldier, the gladiator, or even the imperator, the emperor.
Practicus. Practical. If you use the sidewalks and pedestrian crossings, you will not get your feet dirty from the mud on the road. Calidus. Clever. If you drive a cart, your wheels will pass right between the stone blocks of the pedestrian crossings. And non olet. And it does not stink, because under the sidewalks, there are sewers. The Romans even invented natural lighting. Tiny pieces of white marble on the ground shine at night under the moon to illuminate you. Lucet, it shines.
Take a stick to hit these olive trees and knock down the olei, the olives that you will collect under the trees. Put the olives, except those that will be eaten by hand, in a press, and turn it to crush them and bring out the oleum, the oil that you will put in amphoras.
You can cook itare, cook food with this oil, and pour it directly onto dishes and your bread. In the evening, fill the lucernaya with oil. These lamps light your masters, their guests, and their slaves like you. Put some oil in this bottle. Your master will spread it on his skin before doing sports, and when he is finished, he will scrape his oil skin full of sweat and dust with the striglia, the striggle. In short, it serves as sunscreen and soap.
Dry fish intestines and flesh mixed with salt and herbs for 2 months in the sun. Ugh. Then you get garum. A delicious sauce on Roman dishes. It gives them flavor and salts them. Do you like this sauce? You will find cheap pots, but also high quality pots, which are very expensive.
If you were governing Rome, would you rather be a respected king from the early days, a victorious general, a respected senator from the time of the conquests of the Republic, or an all-powerful emperor from the time of our history in Pompeii? If you are of Oscan origin, your ancestors founded Pompeii at the foot of Mount Vesuvius by the sea. They brought 5 villages together on the banks of the Sarno River and gave this city the name of Pompeii because in Oscan, Pompeii means 5. If you are of Greek origin, you belong to the people who were the most powerful in the Mediterranean area at the time your family arrived in the region. You made Pompeii a rich and beautiful city with, for instance, your beautiful temples and your famous Greek gods, with a large public square as well as boats to develop trade on the sea. If you are of Etruscan origin, your family came from northern Italy to settle here. Like the Greeks, you brought your way of life to Pompeii with, for example, your soothsayers who know how to read the future, and your public games with gladiator fights. If you are of Samnite origin, you are a descendant of the warriors who came from the neighbouring mountain to take Pompeii. You reinforced the city walls before making alliances with the local Romans. If you are a Roman, you belong to the people whose power spreads everywhere today. You made an alliance with the oldest inhabitants of Pompeii before having to fight them. Finally, you made Pompeii a real Roman city, the Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeianorum. It is this rich trading port that you see today. So, do you feel more Oscan, Greek, Etruscan, Samnite, or Roman?
In Ludo, at school. Not very comfortable. This classroom exposed onto the street. Too bad. Come with me. It will distract you from Aristote, your private teacher. Listen carefully to the Ludi Magister, the class teacher. Then take a wooden tablet covered in wax and write with a stylus, a sort of pen. To erase, you will simply heat the wax. Be careful. If you do not answer correctly, you will get a slap on the wrist. So read carefully the Roman numerals and Latin and Greek letters on the wall. Later, we will read stories in a volumen, a scroll which serves as a book. Today, The legend of the birth of Rome, told by a famous poet, Virgile. You will like it.